So unlike their games against Midtjylland, who pressed Celtic quite high up, Jablonec sat off quite a lot and they allowed Celtic to have the ball. But where they fell down and where Celtic got a lot of success was when they were building up possession between the centre halves here. Instead of sitting back and keeping Sorrow here and kind of doubling up in the midfield to give them extra numbers, Jablonec tried to kind of press almost like in a two, and what would happen as the ball went from Starfelt into here, the attacking midfielder would move, and I think the plan was their main striker would then drop in on Sorrow. But with the way Celtic positioned their centre halves, they were quite wide apart. It made these runs very difficult, and therefore it meant that Sorrow was able to get on the ball a lot more. And you can see there, if the team's set up like that with Ralston and Taylor even here, McGregor and Turnbull, Furuhashi, Abada and Forrest, then there's lots of space and attacking players in behind. If one of these guys has to go, then they create an overload in the central part of the pitch. So a little spot there where if teams do tend to press like that or want to do that, it gives Celtic a huge advantage in the middle of the park, and this is actually what led to the first goal. So for the first goal, Jablonec had kind of given up on that two-man press, and at this point the attacking midfielder dropped in to kind of mark Sorrow. But Celtic used this to their advantage, and again showing maybe why Beaton's getting the nod ahead of Welsh, is that the ball moves across them, he's able to bring the ball out, Sorrow's in this position, and here Turnbull a bit further on, Ralston's actually holding wide with Abada there. You can see in the footage Taylor actually pushes in, and you can see him communicate to McGregor to push forward. As he does this, it takes the man out of that space, and he goes into this position in here. Now the reason this is good is Sorrow gets the ball in here. This midfielder does follow but doesn't go straight in with Taylor. Taylor's able to get on the ball, and then at this point as he's playing out to Forrest, Forrest has got lots of space out on this side because the fullback's naturally going to tuck in with their centre half. As the ball works wide to him though, the fullback will engage as you would expect, but Taylor from this position makes a fantastic underlapping run in behind, and Forrest is able to delay on the ball, play that pass in, attract that centre back out. And the great thing here, because Taylor was involved in that build up, McGregor's already there in terms of an attacking sense. Turnbull's coming into this position here, and like he did against Midtjylland, Abada is able to arrive in at the back post. So fantastic movement from Taylor, great use of the inverted fullbacks, great pass wide and a fantastic underlap, and Celtic getting numbers into the box to finish and get the first goal. Now for most of the first half, Celtic played out from the back quite comfortably, and when Jablonec scored, it actually came from a ball down the left hand side. It came off Taylor, but I still think Joe Hart could have picked it up. He chose to use his feet. I'm not sure if the referee called that. He gives it to Taylor here, who's under a lot of pressure and has to go back to him. Now obviously we know from here Joe Hart plays it long, and he plays it down to this side of the pitch, which you can see is very busy with players. The thing to do would have been to open up and probably switch the ball out to the other side, where Abada, Ralston, you've got a bit more freedom on that side, and if the ball goes out then the players can regroup. By kicking it down here, you can see Turnbull loses out in the middle, it falls to a player in the middle, and again the centre halves and Ralston don't really cover themselves in glory here. It's a very simple run through the middle. Beaton and Starfelt are very, very flat, and it's a straight ball through, and then obviously it's a finish. But where I think Jablonec used this to their advantage is at the second half, they pressed Celtic really heavily from goal kicks, and Joe Hart didn't seem to have the confidence to want to play out. They went long and they kept losing the second ball, and again even when Joe Hart picked up, his first thought, because I think Jablonec had pressed, was there'll be space in behind, and kicked long. But again, Forrest, Furuhashi, Abada kept losing out in the aerial duels, and then they picked up the ball. So it's something that going forward he really needs to make sure that he understands that the front three are quite small. There's no point kicking long unless it's absolutely on, and the team have really pushed all their players forward, because it did leave Celtic a little bit exposed on the counter-attack. Now we're going to look at Furuhashi. Now we're not going to analyse his goal. His goal actually came from very similar what we just discussed in the last video, with Beaton actually stepping forward, and this time instead of playing the ball to Sorrow, he just keeps stepping forward, drives into that space, and Furuhashi shows some great movement to peel off and get the ball in behind. But at about 21 minutes, in nearly 22 minutes, Furuhashi just shows so much good movement in the clip, and it doesn't really lead to anything, but I think it's something that Celtic fans should get quite excited about. Taylor works the ball back to McGregor. Furuhashi's out here at this point, and he just drops into this position in here, receives the ball, bounces back to Sorrow. Now as he does that, Abada comes in off the right. Furuhashi recognises that and pulls wide. Now I think the ball gets clipped through, it gets one, Turnbull picks up the loose ball, and again Furuhashi's on the move again. This time he runs across in here looking for the ball in behind. Doesn't quite work out. The ball ends up with McGregor. Furuhashi moves all the way across into this position and is looking for it at feet. Again, doesn't get it. The ball works out to Forrest. Furuhashi again points to look in behind, and that movement drags the centre half out and allows Forrest to come inside, and I think he has a shot that's blocked and goes out for a corner. But just in that sort of 30 seconds, he drops short, he fills in the spaces wide, he then comes back in to make a run in behind, he then looks for feet inside the box, he then makes another run to take away defenders. It was really fantastic, and I think Celtic have got a player in there that's going to be able to offer them so much movement, and it means the front three are able to interchange and move around, which is obviously very difficult to defend against. So looking at Jablonic's second goal, when Celtic made their substitutions, to me they almost started to look more like a 4-2-3-1. Rogic certainly played a lot higher up, and this becomes a wee bit of a problem if you still want to invert your fullbacks. I'm not sure whether or not it was down to Ralston's understanding or maybe just a play that never worked out, but Beaton steps forward with the ball, Soros dragged his man wide, McGregor's come in here, and again they found some good space in for Rogic. It's a decent ball through, he takes quite a heavy touch, gets dispossessed. Now, while that's happening, Ralston's picked himself up and is in this position in here. So when you look now at Celtic's team, there's a huge gap on this side, even with the centre halves and even with Soros here, because Soros again starting to move back centrally. All it then takes is one pass in here to turn and their wingers off and away, and it's too big a recovery for these players to get into. So it is something to think about, and I'm sure Postecoglou, as they're moving through things and changing things up and trying to give people more game time, the understanding part of that tactic is quite challenging. But again, if they're in that position and there's already two deep-lying players in there, like McGregor and Soros in that position, there's no need for the fullback to invert, in my opinion, and I don't think at that point he needs to be that high up in the pitch. Probably better off staying in this position, even maybe letting Abada go into that area and he can stay wide. So maybe a wee bit of flexibility needed and a little bit more understanding, especially at those parts of the game.